Good evening. Being 7 p.m., I'll call to order the McHenry County Board regular meeting of December 17th, 2024. And Mr. Kunkel will lead us in the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if Reverend Cope is in the audience, come on up. Otherwise, we'll proceed to our next agenda item. Clerk, could you call the roll, please?
Altoff.
Here.
Campbell.
Here.
Collins.
Here.
Gottemoller.
Here.
Greeno.
Here.
Hendricks.
Here.
Kaminsky.
Present.
Kearns.
Here.
Krieger.
Here.
Kunkel.
Here.
Sager.
Here.
Shorten.
Here.
Scala.
Present.
Smith.
Here.
Sullivan.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Van Hoff.
Present.
Von Bergen.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum. I will entertain a motion to allow Ms. Von Bergen to attend remotely. Mr. Scala makes the motion. Ms. Altoff seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Mr. Scala makes the motion. Mr. Gottemoller seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of previous meetings. Mr. Scala makes the motion. Mr. Kaminsky seconds. Any discussion or changes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Good evening and welcome to the final county board meeting of 2024. I have a handful of items to share in my report. Thank you to all the county board members who stayed after the committee of the whole meeting last Thursday to break bread with county employees at our annual holiday luncheon. It means a lot to our employees when our elected officials come to celebrate with them and thank them for their hard work. And thank you very much to the board members, countywide elected officials, and department heads who rotated serving food to the employees who serve us year-round. County staff also use the annual luncheon as an opportunity to give to the less fortunate, and I'm happy to report that they filled about 40 boxes full of dry goods to donate to McHenry County food pantries. They also collected $410 for the sheriff's office's annual Shop with a Cop program and $45 for food for the pets awaiting adoption at the Animal Control and Adoption Center. And to top that off, employees and residents filled a total of 5 boxes with unwrapped toys for McHenry County Toys for Tots. On Monday, December 9th, I met with Kenosha County Executive Sam Kirkman. We discussed a number of items such as the development of the Midwest Interstate Trail, Metro service in Kenosha, and how she and her family frequently drive down to eat at Plum Garden Restaurant in McHenry. And finally, this evening, the McHenry County Council of Governments held its annual holiday gathering Wednesday, December 11th at DC Cobbs in Huntley. The event reminds me how very fortunate we are to have such a great group of municipal leaders in McHenry County, and the county board was very well represented. Thank you to members Altoff, Campbell, Gottemoller, Greeno, Sager, Thomas, Van Hoff, and Von Bergen for attending. And that concludes my report. I wish all of you and everyone in the audience and watching at home a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. With that, are there any members' comments today? Seeing none, we'll move to zoning petitions. Do any members have items they'd like removed from the zoning consent agenda? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the zoning consent agenda. Mr. Smith makes the motion. Ms. Altoff seconds. Clerk, could you open the voting, please?
Voting is open.
Voting is open. Have all voted who wish?
Mr. Kearns, hit the push to submit button. Mr. Smith?
Ms. Von Bergen, how would you like to be shown?
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to unfinished business for zoning. I'll entertain a motion to approve item 10C1. Mr. Scala makes the motion. Mr. Kaminsky seconds. Mr. Smith?
Yeah, thank you. And I spoke at this at the COW. I think the Zoning Board of Appeals did a good job of explaining their opinion on why they went forward with recommending the approval of this petition with a 6-0 yes vote. Obviously, we have the need for 14 yes votes because of the majority, because of the letter from Crystal Lake with their objection. But I strongly agree with the ZBA's opinion on this in their recommendation, and I'll be voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Mr. Shorten?
Question on this letter. When we discussed this back in March or April timeframe, there was a set of conditions that the city of Crystal Lake asked for that were listed on the back of the letter. Were those added to were those amended prior to moving this forward until the city and the county, or I'm sorry, the city and the petitioner had a chance to talk?
Say it one more time. Were the
Okay.
conditions were they employed with the petition itself?
Well, no,
Or were
was
they
there,
modified?
was there a modification to meet these?
I didn't recognize any modifications from the first objection letter to the current.
Okay, this is, I'm looking at the one from March 25th that was in the packet. Today's packet.
Yeah, I don't believe there's any, I know that there's any additional condition. It's a rezoning, yeah. So any of those conditions that they put in there, one, they wouldn't pertain to the rezoning to this application because it's not a conditional use.
Okay,
But I didn't recognize any modifications to that letter from the first one to this one.
Okay.
Aside from the boilerplate.
okay. Thank you for that. This is a difficult one for me. I'm struggling with it, and I was thinking back to 2 years ago, one of my first couple meetings, we had another storage facility that came forth. Within county boundaries, right outside Crystal Lake. There was no objection from the city per se, there were objections from residents, and we ended up voting that down, but then the petitioner, a year later, went and before the city of Crystal Lake and were able to come to an agreement between the residents and what have you, and pass that through. So for me, this is not necessarily an issue of whether it's a storage facility or not a storage facility. We're making a zoning change. We have to go on faith that the petitioner is going to go forward with that plan, and certainly it's within their rights to change that, and it's also within their rights to sell the property down the road and someone else to take that zoning and do something different on the property. So that's what we have to take into consideration. So as I go through the list of permitted by right that would be allowed in B3 that are not allowed in B1, I'll just run through them real quick. Agricultural implement sales and service would go from not permitted to permitted by right. Agritourism intensive would go from conditional use to permitted by right. Amphitheater would go to not permitted to permitted by right. And as I look at some of these, not game changers for me. Amusement facility outdoor, conditional to permitted by right. Auction house, not permitted to permitted by right. Auto repair major, not permitted to permitted by right. Broadcasting studio, again, I don't think that's a game changer for anybody, but it goes from not permitted to permitted by right. Car wash could go from conditional to permitted by right. Golf course, driving range, commercial goes from not permitted to permitted by right. Heavy retail, sales and service goes from not permitted to permitted by right. Laboratory, again, not a game changer for me, goes to permitted by right. Lumberyard goes to permitted by right, that's kind of a question mark. Mini warehouse would be permitted by right. Offsite Services goes from conditional to permitted by right. Pawn shop, permitted by right. Printing establishment, public safety training, recreational vehicle sales, all permitted by right. So as I talked to individuals throughout this past week, I set the standard that this is the way I feel, and I have the right to change my mind. And I frankly have gone back and forth in different directions. I have great respect for the city of Crystal Lake, and being a resident there and someone that passes this area, I understand they're concerned about that piece of property and how it's developed. And there is a hardship potentially for the current owner, which has had 20 years where they haven't been able to sell the property. Now, I don't know the circumstances behind that. There's a lot of different factors that impact that. So at this point, I'm sitting in the middle, and again, it comes down to not whether storage facilities or something else. It's whether it's going to be a B1 or a B3, and are those B3 uses on that property appropriate? Some of them are, some of them are not, and so I just wanted to read through that list and have everyone consider, if we approve a B3, that's what could end up there, and that's all I have to say about that.
Mr. Kunkel.
When I started this journey, excuse me, on the county board, I got some great advice from Pam Altoff, because I ran into things like this that I just had I have background in this, but I ran into things I didn't have background in. She said, trust in the process. She said, there are great people working here at McHenry County. There are great committees set up by our board that work very diligently at these items that come on our table. We also have other boards like the Plan and Zoning who have looked at this thing. The process has gone through for this. The process, Adam, no one can ask for a better, we're blessed at McHenry County to have him. He's fantastic at his job. He's dotted the i's and crossed the t's. Our board has passed this unanimously 6-0. It meets all the requirements that McHenry County has. So for then, after this has been round the horn 3 times in front of us, because a municipality has made a minor objection that we should toss the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, doesn't make sense. They've met what we require from McHenry County. The process has done its job, worked its way through. Very good, competent people have worked this process. For any of us to stand up here now and say, no, we're saying we're smarter than the process, we're better than the process. No, it's politics and bureaucracy. And I think we need to put that aside and let commerce move forward in McHenry County on, frankly, a piece of property that has been laying fallow for far too long. I believe we should have resounding unanimous yes to this and move forward with McHenry County. Thank you.
Mr. Kearns.
Mr. Kunkel couldn't have said it any better. We're in the business of helping our, here I moved to this bad mic. We're in the business of running the board and making decisions. And I have a problem, we've booted this thing, or we haven't booted it, it's been booted around at the request of municipality, and I just don't think these folks have been treated very fairly. I welcome their business into the county district if the city of Crystal Lake doesn't want them. I welcome them into our county, into our business organization. I think we should vote for this. I think we've put them through the hoop. The ZBA did do a great job on this one and go unanimous. Guys, we got to vote for this. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further comment. Clerk, could you open the voting, please? Voting is open. Have all voted who wish?
Ms. Von Bergen, how would you like to be shown?
Yes.
Motion carries. We'll move on to public comment. First up, we have Brett Hopkins.
Test. All right, good. Members of the board, members of staff, my name is Brett Hopkins. I'm a lifelong resident of Crystal Lake, and I also serve on the Crystal Lake City Council. I just wanted to come here tonight to introduce myself. And I want to also express that although I am on the council, my views and opinions are just my own for tonight. I think first and foremost, there's a process that I don't understand, where we could have come forward and met with the committee as a whole to talk a little bit about our concerns with this piece of property. That's my fault and my fault alone. I understand that process now, and I think we'll do our best now moving forward. If an issue like this is contentious, right, we'll do our best to make sure that one of us, if not myself, is there to make sure that we represent it in a better way. I also completely understand the purview of the board here, right? As I think a couple board members pointed out to me, you're looking at this as strictly a zoning item. I think you need to understand too that on our side of it too, it's not just zoning, right? But it's also use. So we take a different purview as well. There's been some discussion in the media, right? And maybe a few comments that were here made tonight, with all due respect to the board members who made it. I want to make it explicitly clear that we welcome businesses to Crystal Lake. In fact, if you look at storage units within the last 4 months historically, we've approved 2 storage units on Crystal Lake, both of which are on 176. The issue or the source of contention is that although we welcome new businesses at Crystal Lake, we just didn't feel like this was the right piece of property for that use. In fact, we encouraged it so much, right, when we met with the petitioner, that we pointed out other properties in Crystal Lake that were appropriately zoned that we would be happy to talk to them about. So I note that there was a couple comments made about that, right? And I just want to make sure that it's clear to everybody here that we do encourage business in Crystal Lake, and we're welcome to have the petitioner come anywhere in Crystal Lake. Our issue was the zoning, right? And there are opportunities in Crystal Lake for him to build exactly what he wants. Last but not least, I want to thank, the members of the board for your service. Standing here on this side of the dais, it's a little unique, but I understand and I appreciate all that you do to represent McHenry County as a whole. I know it's difficult. I know every decision weighs on you, but from my perspective, you're representing the McHenry County as a whole in a very bright light. So thank you for your time for me to speak, and I hope maybe next time I'll see you again in a different set of circumstances.
Mark Avalar.
Good evening. Mark Avalar. I'm from Algonquin, Illinois. I live on the Kane County side of the line. I have been a member of our local mental health board for a little over 2 years, and I'm certainly here to see my friend, Miss Linda Hawk, for her formal appointment tonight to the McHenry County Mental Health Board. But I'm solely speaking as the previous gentleman in an individual capacity. Last week, there was an interesting post by Elon Musk. And when Elon Musk speaks, tens of millions of people listen. In this case, 21 million. And he made a rather astonishing statement of, we need to bring down to super low prices for GLP inhibitors, glucagon-like peptide inhibitors. Translation, making medications like Ozempic and Wegovy much as a first defense against chronic disease, most notably obesity, but also type 2 diabetes. A great opinion leader, Dr. Callie Means, some of you may be familiar with him, along with his sister's work, Dr. Casey Means, saying, hold on. What's happening in this country with most chronic diseases, especially obesity, has to do with a spiritual crisis. And he explained it in his post of last Thursday. At the highest level, the multi-front attack on our mitochondrial health represents a spiritual crisis. We have lost touch with the awe-inspiring interconnectedness of our bodies and the connection between the environment and our health. A good spiritual reference could be Exodus, the book of Exodus in Scripture, as well as the book of Numbers. Think of manna and quail. And when I see this, and I'm seeing a proliferation, and some of you are aware, I've been on somewhat of a journey myself, and this is the last meeting of 2024. So for the last 11 and a half months, I was really prompted to do something about, at least for myself, just to be an example, not only to myself, but before God, but also before the community that I've been appointed to serve, in order to get to the root cause, and it is spiritual. As some of you may have noted, I've lost quite a bit of weight. I've lost a little under 70 pounds since the first of the year. And by the grace of God, I was able to accomplish that, but I had to change so much in my lifestyle. And that is a challenge where, knowing from a mental health board, substance abuse is one of the key components of your mission. And are we looking with these semaglutide therapies like Ozempic and Wegovy, are we looking at the next opioid crisis? I remember 10 to 12 years ago when Adderall was used as a wonder drug for the side effect of losing weight. And Adderall is a very powerful medication.
If you could summarize your comments, please.
Please, as you go forward, whether through your own county board, through the mental health board, and your public health board, be aware that some people are calling it an unholy alliance between big pharma and big food and big agriculture. But just watch out for the interest of your residents and encourage the residents the opportunity to help themselves. And I hope that all of us can be examples for residents to do that. Thank you for your time.
Next, we'll proceed to new and unfinished business. I'll entertain a motion to approve item 13A. Ms. Altoff makes the motion. Mr. Scala seconds. Any discussion? Ms. Altoff?
I'd just like to note that all of these recommendations came through Public Health and Community Services Committee, and it's a nice mix of individuals returning to service as well as new individuals offering to volunteer for services, and they all brought really unique and different skill sets to the table. So one of the comments that we had made during the strategic plan is to get new volunteers involved in county government and to have different types of skill sets represented. We did it this time. It's a really nice choice.
Okay, so remember that, keep that in your head until the next agenda item, 14. She's very anxious. It's great. Excited. So any discussion on item 13A? Seeing none, clerk, could you open the voting, please? Voting is open? Voting is open. Have all voted who wish?
Ms. Von Bergen, how would you like to be shown?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve item 13B. Mr. Scala makes the motion. Mr. Kaminsky seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, could you open the voting, please? Voting is open. Have all voted who wish?
Ms. Von Bergen, how would you like to be shown?
Yes, please.
Motion carries. Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve item 13C. Ms. Campbell makes the motion. Ms. Greeno seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, could you open the voting, please? Voting is open. Have all voted who wish?
Ms. Von Bergen, how would you like to be shown?
Yes.
Motion carries. We'll proceed to appointments. I'll entertain a motion to approve appointments to the Mental Health Board and Community Development Housing Grant Commission. Ms. Altoff makes the motion. Mr. Smith seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, clerk, could you open the voting, please? Voting is open. Have all voted who wish?
Ms. Von Bergen, how would you like to be shown?
Yes.
Motion carries. Do any standing committee chairpersons or liaisons have updates or reports for us tonight? Ms. Campbell.
Okay, thank you. So last month, and we had 3 meetings in a row with the Emergency Management Agency. So we hold our local emergency planning committee, we hold our coordinating council, and then we followed up with our natural hazard mitigation plan update. So just a few notes I'd like to make. We have had a little bit of trouble getting a chair for our local emergency planning committee, but Patrick Ulrich, the Huntley Emergency Manager, has accepted this role. And so we're very grateful because we've been waiting for a little bit of time for that. And within these 3 meetings, and they're not exactly specific to the meeting, a couple of things I would note. We've had additions to, or at least they were introduced to our group. Eric Gaynor is our EMA planner, and Sarah Bowen is our EMA intern. So they were introduced at those meetings. We also have the Illinois, it's IPWMAN, it's Illinois Public Works Mutual Aid Network. That's something I was introduced to a couple of years ago. It's a great organization. They do, if you are a member of that organization, it's like having insurance. So if there's a natural disaster and you're part of it, the public work departments of other participating agencies will come to your aid if you have a problem. I do know that there was a township that has withdrawn from that program. I would just encourage all of our municipalities and all of our local governments to reconsider. It is not a very big fee to have this insurance for in the event that something happens. I mean, it can be very, very, very costly to have to clean up after a natural disaster, and IPWMAN is there for you, and they have a lot of services, so it's a great thing to have. Ed Markison, our maintenance superintendent for our Division of Transportation, has been the president for IPWMAN. Vince Kilcullen, who is the Algonquin General Services Superintendent, is now taking on that role, so we're grateful for him for doing that as well. That organization has 490 members in the state of Illinois, and it is growing. So again, I would encourage our municipalities and local governments to look into that. The Hazard Mitigation Plan Review, I can't believe we're in year like 2. We're really moving along here. It was led by Brooke Lloyd, our Chief Deputy for EMA. Dave Christensen was out of town on an EMA national convention, but she did a great job of leading us. We have a number of programs or projects that have are completed and have received funding. We have noted that we are having a little trouble getting some of our projects funded, but I know that our staff is on it, and I am confident that they will see to it that our projects are fully funded going forward. So that is it for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you. As chairman of PED, I'm going to take this moment, and I could have done it under 13A, but I wanted to thank Member Gottemoller, who's the vice chair of this board, for handling the Committee on Committees meeting. He put a lot of time and efforts in ahead of time. So when we did get there, we had some organization to it and some forethought as to getting people onto the committees that they would want to be on, which is important because I think people that they do a better job if they're on the committee that they would like to be on. So I just wanted to give him a thank you for that. It made our work a lot easier that day.
Thank you. Seeing no other updates or reports, we'll move on to routine consent agenda. Do any members have items they'd like removed from the routine consent agenda? Ms. Greeno?
16B 2.3.
Any others? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the routine consent agenda, less item 16B23. Ms. Altoff makes the motion. Mr. Gottemoller seconds. Clerk, could you open the voting, please? Voting is open. Have all voted who wish?
Ms. Von Bergen, how would you like to be shown?
Yes.
Motion carries. Next, I'll entertain a motion to approve item 16B23. Mr. Scala makes the motion. Ms. Campbell seconds. Discussion, Ms. Greeno?
Yes, I would like to amend the resolution to split the allocations between water, sewer, and capital projects. And if I may, explain why is now appropriate? Or
Need
do
a
I have to
second?
have a second?
Do we have a second? Mr. Kaminsky seconds.
Now discussion?
There you go.
Okay, thank you. And I hope that people will voice their thoughts on this. Basically, what this is it's to take ARPA money that remains to be allocated. And I've been able to be involved with the ARPA fund allocations over the last 2 years. Initially, the resolution was going all for capital, and Peter was kind enough to redo it with a 50-50 split. The reasoning that I have is that there were many water sewer projects that were brought forward during the application process. And some of these areas are not as blessed with funding for their projects. And these water sewer projects are going into areas where they're going to be developing industrial parks or largest growth community in the city, in the state of Illinois. When these water sewer projects are completed, and then we will be able to increase our property base and bring revenue to the county. And so anything that we could do to help, because a couple of these communities are on the verge of possibly, I hate to say the word issue bonds, but, and we want to basically alleviate the stress on these communities that don't have the wherewithal that some others do. So that was my motivation to look at this. It's a great opportunity to literally build into our county and help resolve some of these issues that have been going on for, 100 years in one case, and then increase our growth and our property in the county and actually generate revenue for the county. So I'd love to hear any other thoughts on this.
Mr. Scala?
Yeah, just to add a little context. So part of the reason why this resolution is here tonight is because per the ARPA guidelines, we are required to allocate the funds by December 31st, 2024. And so those funds have to be allocated into different buckets. And then we can choose, once it's in a bucket, we can choose the recipients and the dollar amounts for those recipients once it's in a bucket. But we have to get those dollars allocated into a bucket before the end of this year. So what Mrs. Greeno is proposing is to change buckets basically and to put from where we were, which was capital, over to half of it being into different water sewer projects that came before the board a while ago. So again, for reference for new board members, there were water sewer projects that were presented, and they had passed through our criteria by which it was approved. And the problem was we didn't have enough money allocated on the public side in order to meet all the needs that were requested. So the Finance Committee and in turn the full board then allocated dollars, and there were still entities that didn't get the full amount of money that they were asked, they asked us for. And so the Finance Committee and the board had said that if there was new money that came available, that we would take a look at fully funding or funding more of those projects specifically. So that's what Mrs. Greeno is proposing doing. Correct? Yeah, okay. So I guess my only, I don't necessarily have a problem with us doing this. I just want the board to be aware that by doing this, we will be taking money away from the potential need that we have as the county for space. And that was kind of what we had talked about at the finance committee. So, you know, we're doing a space study right now, which is pretty close to being complete, my understanding, or close, somewhat close. Okay, well, all right. And so once that space study is done, we're going to get that information, and we are then going to have to look at what we're going to do as a county to meet those needs. And so by taking half of it and putting it towards water sewer, that balance of money is gonna have to be made up somehow to meet the needs that we have for space. What that looks like, how much space is needed, how much money is needed is a big question mark. We don't have answers for that yet. But by doing this action tonight, by amending it and taking action and saying yes, those funds, which is 1.6 million, 1.66 million, will be off the table to be able to use that. Because again, once it's in a bucket, we can't take it back out of the bucket again. It stays in that bucket and we have to allocate out of that bucket per the federal guidelines. So it's just, I want to be everyone aware, whether we do this or not, I'm not, I don't want to say I don't have a horse in the race, but I'm not advocating one way or another. I just want people to be aware of what their action, the implications of what that action means.
Mr. Smith.
Okay, thank you. And I will advocate one way or the other. I won't support this. And the reason being is because the needs of the county and the budget process that we just battled through, trying to keep the levy flat, even though we ended up with a small raise. We know this space problem's gonna be coming up. We don't know the exact dollar amount, but it's gonna be a problem. We have other capital improvement plans that need to be taken care of. And while there is a need in these smaller communities for this type of funding, there's other funding available, like the community development and housing grant programs. So I think it's a good idea for the county to keep this money in their pocket in this particular instance for the needs that we have. And so I will not be supporting this amendment. Thank you.
Mr. Kunkel.
So our role as a county government here is to be in service and support to our community. Sewer and water is that service to the community. Building and expanding our, quote, needs and space is just providing us a more comfortable way of providing services rather than actually providing the services. So I am in favor of doing this. It seems to make more sense, not to mention these are items that help the commerce and help the growth of the county, tax base and capital and all. This is money invested into our community versus investing money into air conditioners or space to make us all more comfortable here. Personally, I think this is probably a good split here because we had a space study done. I won't quote exact dates because I've seen the space study, but it's about 15 or 20 years ago. At the time they quoted us of having, or they said we had 307,000 souls in McHenry County. They said by this time and this date of 25, we would be at 428,000 souls. We would need X amount of square footage and yada, yada, all this stuff. They blew out this thing. And here we are now, fast forward in that time frame, and we're up to 311,000 people. We're up about 4,000 souls, and that depends if you can track them down in that time frame. So the space study is kind of a professional opinion of where we will be. It is not to say where we are going to be or we'll need that money for. I don't think there's an absence of that money. If this county is still run fiscally prudent, whether we have these ARPA dollars or not, we will still provide the services to the county. But it seems wrong to take these monies for ourselves instead of actually providing them for services for the county. I think a 50-50 split is very generous. Thank you.
Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Chairman. I guess I have some questions about this money and how it's going to be done. The first, does this money actually cover any of the shortfalls that exist at these different projects? So are they still going to be short money and the project may or may not happen? Do we know the answer to that question?
You want it, Mike? Or you want it, Pete? Who wants it?
I won't throw Pete under the bus. I think there was 7 projects that were presented to the Finance Committee, and some of them were funded 100%, and some of them were funded at different levels depending on the project itself. Some of the projects we got were close to $3 million, so naturally they didn't fully fund that. Larry is correct that, Mr. Smith is correct that there are CDBG dollars that these municipalities can go for, and they have been getting in order to meet some of those needs. Some of the projects were already completed, and so we were simply reimbursing those municipalities for the money that was already spent. So I'll use Huntley as an example. They had requested, I want to say $900,000, $875,000, and we gave them half of that money. They had already done the project, so we were just simply cutting them a check to reimburse them for that. So to kind of answer your question, it's not clear cut as to exactly, are we fully funding these or are we reimbursing? Or I mean, so each project was specifically different.
So the possibility exists that somebody could come looking for some money, but it's still not enough to get the project done.
Well, they won't, so the projects that these dollars would go to are already in our purview as far as we've already approved them as projects that qualify and met our standards. And we've already given each of these projects a chunk of money towards them. So what as a finance committee, what we would do if this passes, we would look at those same exact projects, and then we would have to go back and allocate the 1.66 million to the remaining projects that haven't been fully funded on some allocation basis, which some of them would probably then get fully funded and others would still not be fully funded.
Okay, thank you. So we have a process to allocate the money already then? That was my second question.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Kearns.
Without getting into much detail, everyone's pretty much covered it. I can't support the amendment. I kind of was against a lot of the different projects that we did before. I can't support this amendment. Thank you.
Ms. Altoff.
Just clarification, am I understanding no new projects can be considered? It's only the projects that the Finance Committee has already looked at. They would receive potentially additional dollars. Thank you.
Ms. Campbell.
Yes, I just wanted to point out, I mean, I think that when we talked about space, I mean, I don't think it's, I mean, I understand maybe the perspective that it's kind of like making us more comfortable, but we had kind of we went around about whether or not we should be renting space for our election center or whether we should be purchasing something. And we do have a tremendous space need, and we need to find out the best way to be doing this to make sure that we are spending our taxpayer dollars appropriately. So I don't see this as just making ourselves more comfortable. I mean, this is it's been a huge issue for us in terms of how we house our different departments, where they are, whether we rent, we buy, whatever it is that we're doing. And so I don't want to minimize the importance of this study. I don't, to some of the other comments that have been made, we did go around about this with the Finance Committee, with the different, with supporting the water sewer I know people don't like the idea of going out for bonds. There are certain projects that are longer term where bonds can be appropriate. I don't necessarily think it's a terrible thing, in that you have future generations or future users helping to pay off something that's going to be benefiting long into the future. Whether or not some of these municipalities want to go that route, that's up to them. But I don't necessarily always see that as a bad thing, especially in the public sector. But I do not support this amendment. Thank you.
Ms. Greeno?
So I just wanted to reiterate that, yes, these projects have all been presented to, through the process and looked at. The ones in particular that hopefully that we would consider are ones that, again, are not completely funded. It wouldn't be used for reimbursement of monies that have already been spent on projects that have already been completed. But I think what's most important is that we're talking about industrial growth and we're talking about residential growth that will increase our base for property taxes, that will generate revenue for this county. So instead of putting this into a capital asset, we'd actually be putting it into a P&L as a revenue generator. So if we could just grasp that, it's a long-term revenue generator for the county that we would be helping to promote. So I think it's a great opportunity and a great use of these ARPA funds that were dropped out of the sky for nothing that we did or deserved. So we'll vote.
Mr. Kearns?
I'll say the ugly words in the room. A lot of us don't like to vote for tax levy increases. And this is an opportunity not to vote for property tax increases by denying or this amendment. It's $1.6 million that next year you don't have to claw back and fight for in this budget next year, in next November. And so think about that. This was one of my arguments all along when we started giving funds out to different projects, that some of those projects could have been funded other places. And I don't want to vote for a tax increase ever. And this helps us do that by not voting for this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on the amendment by voice. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? I think the nays have it. We'll vote now, or is there any further discussion on the original motion? Seeing none, clerk, could you open the voting, please? Voting is open. Have all voted who wish?
Ms. Von Bergen, how would you like to be shown?
Yes.
Motion carries. No ordinances. Pete, you got a report for us today?
But there's one item that I didn't get on the written report on Thursday. Our Assistant Director of Transportation, Scott Hennings, has informed me that Metra staff will be at the upcoming Green Drinks event at Duke's Ale House on January 8th at 7 p.m. to talk about, the fiscal cliff and the environmental impacts of not having rail and all that. So, what's your question? 7 p.m. 6 p.m. And if you don't believe me, ask Carolyn. I was going to say, I'll have Scott send out a follow-up reminder to everybody. So thank you. And then finally, I just say Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. Thanks for a great 2024.
Okay. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Scala makes the motion. Ms. Greeno seconds. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Motion carries. Merry Christmas.